What's up everyone, my name is Mark Hawk and today we're doing a quick side-by-side with the GoPro Hero 3 Plus Silver Edition running the latest 2.0 firmware against Sony's brand new AS100V. We're going to put these cameras through a bunch of tests, so let's not waste any time, let's get out there. You can use these quick links to jump to any part of the video you're most curious about, anything from distortion, stabilization, low lights, underwater between two different cases. There's a whole bunch of examples throughout this entire video. Otherwise, sit back and press the play all button or let it start in like 5 seconds here. What's up everyone, my name is Mark Hawk and today we're taking a quick look at GoPro Hero 3 Plus Edition with the new firmware 2.0 against Sony's new AS100V. And yeah, we're going to try and climb this here with no chest harness, so let's get to it. We're shooting this with the Steady Shot, 1920 30 frames a second vivid mode, and the GoPro Hero 3 Plus is in its all standard mode, and there's no Pro Tunes or color change options on this model, even with the new firmware 2.0 installed. So yeah. So the camera on the left is the Sony HDR AS100V, and it's got its stabilization turned on, and the camera on the right has its field of view focus set to medium, just so we can kind of get a good comparison of the two. Now you're going to notice with the Sony, the stabilization is holding up pretty well. The GoPro has a minor shake throughout the entire video. Again, you can fix this post if you wanted to, but it's nice to have the option to just turn this off and not have to worry about it later. You can just see sort of when we pan left to the right, it keeps a nice smooth motion. Sometimes when we have the more jerkier motions, the Sony will kind of bump. And you'll notice this a lot here in the jogging. It's kind of like a quick jerk motion along the edges every few frames, so that can be a kind of little off-putting. And into some jogging. As you can see, my shadow shows you this. My shadow shows you that I am jogging. So you're probably noticing also that the Sony has a lot more saturation and color, and that's because we have it on its vivid color space mode. We're going to go more into color in a little bit, but right now these cameras in terms of color space aren't on even playing ground, so we'll kind of cover that a little bit later. So this next section is kind of a blast. We had the sexy saxophone guy come and do a sexy saxogram for my buddy's birthday party. So this is going to be a really good audio test for these two cameras, and it's also going to be a good test for indoor filming. So pay attention to the icons on the screen as to which audio is coming from which camera.
Birthday boy right here!
That was a blast, dude. That guy was amazing. He was super chill. He came back and he hung out with us. He gave us these little beer cozies and stuff like that with his face on it. Awesome guy, so big thanks again to him. If you guys are interested, I threw an unlisted link in the bottom right here if you want to see everything that happened behind the scenes and after that, so it was a lot of fun. So before we move on to this next scene, the audio in the last scene, pretty self-explanatory. The Sony AS100 definitely had a much crisper, clearer sound. The GoPro Hero 3 Plus Silver was a little muffled. It's still a very good audio, but for music situations, you're definitely going to want to get that extension cable and probably hook up your own mic, which is kind of a bit of added cost. But if you're going to be doing audio recording and audio is really important to you and you do go with the GoPro, definitely spring the extra $5 or $6 for that cable and get a cheap $30 mic to throw on your GoPro. So the footage we've had playing in the background here is kind of a focal distance test, but it's also starting to take a look at the different color options between the Sony and the GoPro. Now with the Sony, we're filming in its vivid color space, which initially looks pretty good. It's nice and sharp, it's got a nice pop, but if you look at the sky, you're going to see we don't have a ton of information when we go from the light blue to the dark blue, so there's a much noticeable line. Now when we switch over to the neutral color grade here, we're going to have a lot more information in between those values of blue. So it kind of gradiently, there's a nice sort of ramp between those levels of color. The GoPro default color grade has this by default, so we're kind of seeing all that information, but it does feel a little washed out and a little crunched compared to the Sony when we can jump back and forth between the two options. Unfortunately, with the GoPro Hero 3 Plus Silver, we don't have any color options. We only have the default color grade, which, you know, half the time is going to be great, but if we ever do want to switch to a more neutral color plate, we can't do that with the Silver. So if we start to take a look at the various focal distance these cameras offer, we're going to notice with the Sony that it holds up fairly well. It's not the greatest in terms of focal distance, but the city holds up fairly sharply. The people on the footbridge are pretty recognizable. The bushes have all their individual twigs that are kind of nice. They're not super muddy. But if you look at the person on the footbridge right now as she's going over the twigs, she's very fuzzy, she's very muddy. Again, you compare that to Sony's, it's a little sharper, even though the GoPro has a much sharper contrast right now. It's not really benefiting it at all compared to the washed out Sony more neutral color grade. So here you're going to notice that the sort of graffiti on the pipe is super sharp, my foot is super sharp, but past my foot the GoPro starts to get a little muddier. So you see that bush on the left, super sharp on the Sony AS100V. And again, this is the vivid color mode, but I don't personally think it makes that much of a difference. And then as we get down to the road, again, the Sony still stays a bit sharper.
Subimos por otro lado. Por ahí bajamos. Por ahí subimos, vaquero. Y bajamos. Cuidado con los carros.
So while the GoPro Hero 3 Plus Silver doesn't have any color options built into it, it does offer you free software known as GoPro Studio, which has some color options that you can use to actually match a lot of what we have on the right in post-production. So you can just load the footage in, up the contrast a little bit and saturation, and you'll get very similar results. So as we scale up to 200% here, you're going to notice the focal distance on both of these cameras is kind of just okay. It's nowhere near as good as the GoPro Hero 3 Plus Black, but I also don't feel it's $100 off, because that's kind of the price difference between these two cameras and the Hero 3 Plus Black, unless you're going for the remote with the AS100V. But overall, the view distance on these is pretty okay. So here we're looking at the vivid color mode, and we're going to kind of focus on that dome structure in the upper left on both of these shots here. So again, we're filming in the vivid color mode with the Sony AS100V, and we're going to scale up here in a second to just kind of look at the detail on the dome itself. Now again, the scaling isn't to represent how you'll use the video, it's kind of just to show you through YouTube the quality loss between the two cameras. Like, it's a little easier right now to see those people in the bottom right, that the guy is a little fuzzier on the right hand side than the left, but you can also see what type of quality you're losing and what type of distortion you're seeing in the dome itself. You'll see as we switch from the vivid color mode to the neutral color mode, there's not much of a quality difference. You're just losing a lot of that contrast and saturation. The sharpness in the Sony pretty much stays the same, but again, you can make that argument that when you up the contrast, it is going to make your edges sharper and your dark areas more crisp.
So why, let's say, our relationship remains good? Why?
You can see on shots like this, the distortion of the Sony AS100 in the upper right is making those branches kind of rounded off that are kind of in the distance. You're not getting that out of the GoPro at all, even at the same 170-degree lens that we have. So here we're kind of slowly going into our low light situation. The GoPro Hero 3 Plus Silver, once we start to get into that sort of golden hour, makes a really nice image. The GoPro has always sort of excelled in those sort of warmer color temperatures, while the Sony in its neutral color mode is a little flatter, but that's what you kind of want out of a neutral color mode, because then later on you can color grade it yourself, you'll have more control, things won't be as crunched as much. It also makes it a lot easier to match other cameras that you're filming with. So if we had several cameras recording a certain scene, we'd want to be able to set each camera into a neutral color mode and then let a colorist later on sort of match all 5 cameras, so it feels a little more seamless, so it's a little less jarring when we go from camera A to camera B. We don't want the viewer really thinking about, oh, this scene looks different. We want to just sort of keep them engaged in our video. So we have all 4 shots here. Technically there's only 3. You have the 2 Sony color spaces on the left, and then the GoPro on the right is the same top and bottom. But you can get a quick idea of what your saturated mode with the vivid mode looks like. It's a really beautiful picture, and if you don't want to mess with it later, you know, you're all set. But the bottom left one's going to give you a lot more control, and the same with the GoPro. The GoPro is somewhere in the middle of these 2 shots. You have a little more control because it's not as crunched as, let's say, the Sony, but at the same time you can't switch it to the more Pro Tunes model that you have in the Hero 3 Plus Black. So if you want to do color correction, it's kind of really important you consider if that extra $100 is worth having that Pro Tunes option to you. The thing I really love about this shot is that it shows that both cameras are really capable of getting really amazing results. Now, you could always argue which one's better in which area, but it really depends on the situation. Right now, this situation is ideal for both cameras. The scene looks great no matter which camera you're looking through. And in the low light situations, hands down the Sony HDR AS100V normally wins. Just the CMOS sensors are so small, it's really hard to get really good low light images, but the Sony's doing a really good job, even though the GoPro Hero 3 Plus uses the same image sensor. The software or the illuminated back sensor, the way Sony's using it, just works much better for low light. But then again, this isn't really a nighttime setting. We didn't really get a chance to do super low light settings, but the results kind of speak for themselves between the indoor tests and this. You can kind of see around the arc light area. There's a little more detail. It's not as dark. The wall is definitely a little brighter and stuff like that. A lot of that just has to do with the software Sony is using with their image sensor as opposed to what GoPro is doing with the same image sensor. So if you've made it this far into the video, I have to warn you, this next section, not as good as my last underwater test. Unfortunately, I had to use myself as a subject, and I made a few mistakes in my rush to get this all filmed. Initially, I grabbed a red filter for the GoPro Hero 3 Plus instead of a magenta filter, which is what you need in a sort of teal environment. But just look at the sharpness of these 2 cameras. So with the AS100V, we're using the original default bubble case. Unfortunately, if you've seen our other videos, you know this gives us a very muddy and blurry look. And that's just because of how it's sort of domed and where the camera is positioned and how light reflects into it. We get this very kind of crappy image. But if we take off the filter with the GoPro Hero 3 Plus, you're going to notice it gives us a very teal image. So you're definitely going to want to get a magenta filter if you're in a pool. You're going to want to get a red filter if you're hopping in the ocean. However, we're using the flat lens for the Sony AS100V, and it's a huge improvement. But unfortunately, it's also a huge sort of price increase, because that case is going to run you about an extra $50 as opposed to a filter which is only going to cost you around $20 to $30. Now, I use the Polar Pro filters with my GoPros. They're pretty easy. They snap on there, and I'll be honest, they do send me some to test out every now and then, but I've always liked their stuff. And you can see when we zoom in here, just to kind of give you an idea of what the sharpness difference are, and we'll just sort of freeze on this frame here. Both cameras actually hold up pretty well, thanks to Sony has a built-in scene and color mode that's built for underwater. So it's definitely making the image look a lot nicer. Those bubbles look really sharp. The hair detail's all there. It's all there in the Sony, but thanks to those color options on the Sony AS100V by default, the images just come out looking really nice. Like, that's really super teal, but all the crisp images are there. And this has a little warm skin sort of issue, but for the most part, I like that image a lot better than what we're getting by default out of the GoPro. Look at that beast. Anyway, guys, I gotta go eat dinner. So thanks again for checking out this video. Be sure to subscribe. We got a bunch of other videos coming out over the summer. It's going a little slower than I hoped, but yeah, I'm hoping we're going to get back on track. So keep your comments coming. Send me questions at markhawkcam@gmail.com, but you'll probably get a faster response if you leave them in the comments below. Also, check out some of our other videos. And if you guys have any concerns or if I got anything wrong, feel free to call me on the comments. And before you guys tell me, yes, I know I have a long neck. Sound like Kermit the Frog. And I look really good in a bathing suit. So thanks. Alright guys, I'll talk to you later. Have a good one.